The following podcast is brought to you by the Johners Podcasting Network, found exclusively at WrestlingWithJohners.com. Hello and welcome to the latest live episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is episode 303 this is my second live interview in the space of 24 hours. So last night, Tuesday, episode 302 was with the English Lion, Eddie Ryan, a fantastic guest he was. We spoke all about his wonderful 15-year career, about Lions Den Pro and so much more. We had a good, I think, hour and 45 with Eddie, told some wonderful stories. And you may have seen, dropped a couple of weeks ago, my exclusive Progress interview with legendary wrestler and commentator Nigel McGuinness. If you haven't checked that one out, please go and do so on my YouTube channel. And last week, you may have seen this young up-and-coming professional wrestler, Ripper Reed, who's doing some wonderful things. He's currently on excursion over in Japan. Ripper Reed, one of Joel Redmond's trainees. We had a wonderful chat with Ripper Reed about his excursion and his time training over here with Joel. And next week, my guest is none other than Rain Leverkusen. Wednesday the 21st, live on Wrestling with Johners, 8 p.m. But today, it's all about this guy here. And this has been a much anticipated interview in the works for quite a while now. Not to embarrass my guest, but widely considered one of the very best British technical wrestlers in the world today. James Mason, great to have you on the show. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for finally getting me on. It was a tricky one, but we've done it.
Well, you're a busy guy. And I know that we've bumped into each other several times now over the last year and a half. Cheltenham, Tewkesbury, various other places, James. But you're, without wanting to embarrass my guests, like I say, I think this year marks 30 years in the business, and you seem to be as busy as ever.
I certainly seem to be, yeah. July 29th of this year will be my 30th year, and yeah, it's been fantastic, and I'm just still blessed to still be doing it and doing it at a good level, I think. So, yeah, I'm really pleased.
And you're still clearly enjoying it. But, I mean, you're out doing seminars on a regular basis, performing most weekends, ring hire as well all around the country. But what sort of things kind of really excite you in 2023, having all them years of experience under your belt? What sort of things still turn you on to wrestling nowadays, James?
I think it's just a live audience, a live crowd that's my time to come out myself, to be someone I'm not. So, John, I did warn you about the dogs.
That's right. My little dogs will probably start yapping soon.
Just the live feel of it. I'm a very private guy, really. I've got my own life with my wife and children. So when I'm away working, I turn into someone else, really. And I think I still have the same enjoyment out of it as I did 30 years ago. So all the time I've still got that, and I still feel like I'm offering something. I just still love it. I'm still going to keep doing it.
Absolutely. And for anybody watching live at home on Facebook Live, on YouTube and Twitch, you can get in touch with the show, and people have already started doing so. Get in touch, send us your questions, send James Mason your live questions, and we'll do our very best to answer as many of those during the course of this live interview over the next hour or so. But it's an absolute honour to have James on the show. And just focusing on this year alone, James, I know that we've bumped into one another in Cheltenham for WPW Super Clash and in Tewkesbury, I think it was, for Southwest Wrestling. So some pretty class promotions there that have kind of old school values, but Wrestling Society, PEW, Mega Slam, of course, Black Country Championship Wrestling, and many more. Some fantastic groups that you've performed for this year. Let's say some groups that you've obviously enjoyed performing for, and obviously enjoy your style of wrestling.
Yeah, I think I'm still very blessed in what I do. There still seems to be a place for it on the shows. So I feel like now I go to a lot of shows and I'm doing a lot of different companies, and I'm just very lucky that what I do does still seem to work. I don't do anything like I used to do. I watch the rest of the show. That's a big thing about me. I love watching the rest of the show, and unless I'm on first or second, I can pretty much see what works with the audience, and I just go and try and do what they want, and it just keeps me current on those shows. So I still feel like I offer something on those shows. When I watch the rest of the show, I just feel like what I'm doing is still very different than everyone else. It's certainly not better. It's certainly not, I'm not doing any more than anyone else. I think I'm just doing something a little bit different. So it's making me stand out. So all those companies you said, I still feel like there's a place for me on those shows, which is great to do.
And do you feel that, I mean, you mentioned that unless you're on first and second, you're kind of out there watching as much of the action as you can, James. Do you still soak it in and maybe learn one or two things? And obviously modern pro wrestling is different to the era that, you know, you learned your craft in. But do you still kind of watch the youngsters or watch the more modern talent and take things from it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm a huge fan of live wrestling. I love any live entertainment, live comedians, live singers, any live theatre, anything live for me is still interests me. And live wrestling is just no exception. I absolutely love, and I do a lot of ring high as well. Go there and just hide a ring. And I don't actually wrestle. And sometimes it's great. I absolutely love just watching it. And I'm picking up all the time. And it could just be just letting me know what still gets over with an audience, because that's the key. Sometimes you can have a match that, well, I didn't do everything I wanted to do in a match, so people think it isn't a good match. But there's a connection with the audience. Every match that's got a connection with the audience is a winner for me. And I feel like the more I watch shows, and the more I've watched shows all over the years, I've just learned what connects with an audience, and that's what still always keeps you current. And that's where, if you're on in the first match, if you're on in the fifth match, or God forbid you're on in the eighth match, as long as you've got an idea of what that audience, what works for them, you're always going to stay current. And that's what my biggest advice to people is watch the show, see what's working. And I'm getting so much, even now, still watching shows and picking stuff all the time. Not so much moves. I don't feel where I'm picking up moves or things, but I'm picking up what makes an audience tick. And over the years, things have changed. And I'm finding at the moment, making things a bit more logical, making things make a bit of sense. If you can do something that makes sense, to me, it's always going to work, because we've gone so far beyond on a wrestling reality side of things now. But if you can still make things logical and make it believable, to me, that is always going to work. And that's sort of what I feel like I have at the moment.
Yeah, some wonderful advice, And I think the first time that we bumped into one another would have been last February, I want to say, in Cheltenham, at the Cheltenham Town Hall. And again this February, same location for the same promotion. Here's a picture of that beautiful venue. Now, I've spoken to several pros, and one pro in particular, or the ring announcer that was there for this year's show, Lee Bamber, an old World of Sport ring announcer, of course, somebody you know very, very well. But going back to that venue, like I say, that must have been a venue that you went to quite a few times back in the day, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I was actually lucky enough to watch a couple of shows there as a youngster. So my father was great. He took me to shows all over the country. I mean, just all over the country. And that was sort of how I got my foot in the door, really, just by seeing the shows. And that was a venue where we had been to watch shows. And then once I was 14, I actually did a match there. And it was, just a really good, prestigious venue. So over the years, I've probably wrestled there. I mean, I couldn't guess, but it's still, certain venues have a real prestigiousness about it. And obviously going back to Cheltenham twice a year is a real treat. Something unique about the audience there, the crowd. And I mean, you were there, you saw it certainly wasn't an old school crowd. There wasn't all older people, but there was some there. So you had to cater for them. You had to cater for a new school type of audience. You had to cater for a family show. You had to cater for 5 different types of audiences there. And I think if you could do that, then it just makes it a great venue to work in. I heard some people say, well, it wasn't as noisy as they thought. They expected more because it had a bit of prestigiousness to it. But I just felt you've got to know how to work those sort of audiences and those sort of venues. And that's where I feel like I come into my own on shows like that.
Absolutely. And like I say, at the most recent show in Cheltenham, WPW, you teamed with Tucker, didn't you? Like I say, former NXT UK talent. I've had him on the show a couple of years back. A really, really fun guy to be around, and a wonderful professional wrestler. And I think you went up in a tag team match against Kean Kelly, the Fox, and Jim Diehard. So 4 experienced pros in the tag match there. And that brings us to our first question that came through from Darren Ewan, who sent it to me a while back. The question is for James. What was it like to team for the first time with somebody like Tucker? So I know the chemistry appeared to be there between yourself and Tucker, and you guys had a lot of fun against these 2 bigger competitors, Kean, of course, and Jim Diehard, let's say vets of the UK scene. But you had a lot of fun there with Tucker, didn't you?
Yeah, well, Tucker's a great guy. I knew Tucker a little bit, and I knew a bit of what he did. So I look at what Tucker's style is. I look at my style. We're completely different. So it's going to work. Let him be the crazy guy that wants to flip or wants to do some crazy stuff, and I'll be the guy that doesn't. And some reason it can just work. And I think it worked on that day. It was a good chemistry. I knew what he did. He knew what I did. And I think we just gelled well with each other. So no, he's a great guy. And I knew him a little bit before. So it was real good to spend a bit of time with him that day. And a great guy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. And of course, the most recent time I saw you was in Tewkesbury. We mentioned that. I think it was at the Watson Hall, so another really nice venue.
Yeah.
But it was against a slightly different opponent this time, and Axel Carter. But not an exactly unfamiliar type of wrestling match for you, because it was a British rounds match, wasn't it? I think it was called the Brit Pro Cup, and Axel was a fantastic opponent for you, and took you to the limit. Actually became the new Brit Pro Cup winner as well, slightly unexpectedly, but like I say, to the delight of the Tewkesbury crowd there, who were red hot all night. But tell us a bit about wrestling Axel, because another young up and coming wrestler that's really come onto my radar in the last few months. I know he's recently come back from Mexico as well, so seems to be kind of heading in the right direction.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He's a very keen guy. I think my best connection with Axel is we swap ring jobs with each other. So if I get double booked for a ring job, I send it his way, and vice versa. So we've got a great working relationship, and we've wrestled each other many times now. And yeah, he's always great to wrestle. I think he's quite new to that style. I think he wanted to do more of that style, but it didn't. To me, in my opinion, it didn't go as well as. Well, it didn't go as well for me, as you know, but it didn't go as well as that style can with some people. So when people want that sort of match, it's got to be booked right. You need to book it with a guy that wants to do that stuff, that understands that stuff. And I think if me and Axel was to do that 5 more times, 10 more times, the chemistry would be out this world. But it was just, if I was to wrestle Johnny Kidd again, the chemistry is fantastic. If I was to wrestle Dean Allmark again, the chemistry is fantastic because we've done it so many times. So I think certain companies want to see a certain match, and it doesn't always go exactly as they want it on the day. But if you was to do it 5 more times, 10 more times, then you can really get that chemistry up. So, but I mean, for me, anytime I've got a chance to do rounds matches and 3-4 matches, it's just the joy for me. That's sort of what I was brought up on. When I'm watching wrestling in my own time, that's what I'm watching. And it's still an art form to be able to do that. And for the guys that taught me, it's still an honour to still be able to do that and to give it some credibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to take a bit of a deep dive into your wrestling style and kind of how you've added to the legacy of British pro wrestling and how it's kind of grown around the world. But we'll talk about that in a moment. And we mentioned earlier about some of the groups that you've performed for, but we got a particular question that came in before we went live, and it's from Richie. And he's quite intrigued about some seminars that you've taught at, New Wave in particular, and No Mercy, South Wales Wrestling Promotions, companies I'm very familiar with. So what was your experience like of doing seminars in New Wave with Brendan White, of course, and No Mercy with Chris Bevan, and any plans to go back to South Wales anytime soon?
Well, my plans are to go train as much as I can anywhere for anyone I can. I mean, I absolutely love it. And I always start my seminars with, or training sessions, I prefer to call them. I only started doing training about sort of 4 or 5 years ago. Until maybe 4 or 5 years, I'd never done a training session in my life. So
really,
I've only just wrestled. That's all I've ever done. And then I went and did the job with NXT, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And they basically taught me to coach. But I only really know how to coach on an NXT standpoint, which is fantastic. I mean, it's the best coaching in the world as far as I'm concerned. So it's a great base. And I only know what they've sort of taught me or how I should be getting the teaching starts across. So it's absolutely great for me. And I feel like I'm delivering a bit of a different session from a lot of other coaches out there and not taking away from anybody else. But I'm not really teaching moves. Everyone's got this appeal that I'm this technical wrestler that can do 1,000 holds. It's a bit of a myth, really. I can certainly do some holds and I can do them very well, but that's not what I would go to a training school and teach, really. I'm trying to put a bit of logic into it. I want things to make sense. I want to break down something that everybody does and say, right, now let's see why we're doing that. And if you can teach someone a reason why they're doing it, to me, that's really sort of paying off for me. And I'm as simple as an international. Anyone who's in wrestling will know what an international is. Now, if you can break down what an international is and why it's done and what these elements are for, now all of a sudden their heads opened up and now they're thinking of it just adds so much more to a simple thing that everyone's doing. Instead of just doing it because it looks cool, now we're doing it with a bit of realism and with a bit of logic behind it. And it's the same with any high spot. You can make any high spot in wrestling, but if there's a reason behind it and it's delivered in a way that the people get behind it, it's going to just mean so much more. So I feel like with my training sessions or seminars, as you say, I'm trying to get that element across. I'm trying to get a bit of logic into it. And I'm just picking up from some of the great people I've been training with over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. And I'm finding now the more seminars I do, the better I am actually in the ring, because I'm doing stuff that wasn't obvious to me. Now I'm rethinking it, reevaluating it and realising, now let's do it this way. It makes a lot more sense. And it's seems to be working. So it's helping me as much as I'm hoping I'm helping other people. But New Wave was an exceptionally good one. It was a huge class. I think it was 30 people. That was very hard. Like I do like the smaller classes, but unfortunately they don't really pay as well for the school, for everybody. So you need them on numbers. I did one this week for Hustle.
Yes.
Doing one with Top Rope Academy coming up. And yeah, I've got quite a few coming up, and I absolutely love them. I drive there and I'm all thinking, what am I going to do? My head's all over the place. I haven't got a clue. And then within minutes of being there, this whole brainwave that I didn't know I had has opened up. And it's just, now we're running out of time, and I'm wishing we had an extra hour on every class to do more. But I'm absolutely loving it. And if you'd have asked me this 4 or 5 years ago, it just wasn't something I was interested in. I'm a wrestler. I want to wrestle. But actually, thinking about it, I've done some stuff at Joe Redmond's school, which I can't praise that school enough. It's for producing people that want to be superstars, basically. It's just, it's been great. And it's just great that I'm getting asked to do these sort of things, and people are listening to what I'm saying, opposed to, because I'm not big on high spots. I'm not big on fancy combinations. I'm more big on making things make sense. So it's a different type of session for people. Sorry, I'm babbling on a bit, but hopefully
no, not at all.
Explains the sort of classes I'm trying to do, opposed to these amazingly fun, over the top, like, let's do this, let's do that, let's go crazy. I want it to make sense, and I'd rather take more time on a simple thing, and then it just adds more to the big things, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think breaking down professional wrestling and adding some logic to it and making it all make sense is probably more appreciative to a younger class in a seminar, for example, than show them how to do a moonsault. Because, a moonsault's only going to get a reaction for that, 10-second spot. But showing them how to get emotion out of the fans, or, why a particular combination of moves makes sense in a particular situation, is going to last them longer as a young pro wrestler, or even down the line, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think so. I mean, a moonsault looks fantastic. Let's be honest. When someone does a moonsault, it's great. But you go to a show now, they're gone are the days with 4 matches on the show, maybe 5 matches. There could be 7, 8 matches on the show. So you'll probably find someone else who's going to do a moonsault, and they just might do it a bit better than you. I know what I used to do, and then I realised over time, well, I can't do these things as good. But Johnny Storm would come along, the Jodie Fleischer come along. Well, I couldn't compete with them. So that's when you have to go down a different route. And that's what I'm trying to give everyone, a different route. Unless you can be the absolute best at these elbows, at these moonsaults, at these crazy springboard high spots people do, you need to just be something a bit different. So by making sense of the smaller things, it can now make those bigger things look a bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've actually got Axel Carter watching us live via YouTube. Thanks for the kind words. What's your favourite venue to wrestle in? So Axel's asking a question there. Do you have a favourite? Oh, you spoke about the Cheltenham Town Hall and the Watson Hall in Tewkesbury, 2 grand, very fine venues. But do you have any favourite venues besides those?
I mean, it's hard to pinpoint one, unfortunately. Like the one I used to really enjoy, it was more because I used to go to a lot of shows with my father. We always used to go to Aylesbury Civic Centre, and it's shut down now. It's gone. It used to be the Reg Maxwell Hall, and it was just fantastic. There's some great World of Sport matches from there. There's a Tony Sinclair and Johnny Kincaid match from there, and I can watch it on YouTube, and I can feel the atmosphere because it's so good on there. And I used to sit in that audience watching matches there regularly. It was always on the first Monday of the month, so it'd be the night before Fairfield Hall, and religiously, my dad would take me to Aylesbury on the Monday, Fairfield Hall, Croydon on a Tuesday, and to try and separate those 2 venues. But Aylesbury Civic Centre it was a bit special to me. But then I could say about Hastings White Rock Theatre, probably had one of my most memorable matches I ever had there. Portsmouth Guild Hall, and I could just go on. There's some amazing venues that still run some shows. But yeah, Aylesbury Civic Centre I think might be my favourite.
And can I ask, I know that when I was a teenager, I would watch AllStar Wrestling in the Oxford Town Hall back in the early to mid-90s with some of the kind of classic British wrestlers. But you mentioned Aylesbury there. Would that have been AllStar Wrestling by any chance?
Yeah, I mean, it was, so the very first show I went to was a Dow Martin, Matt Scrabby show. I went to them for probably about my first year. My father would take me. I think it was around about 96, 97. I remember the first show I went to as clear as anything. I remember the full bill, and I was hooked, instantly hooked. And then after about maybe a year's time, there was an All-Star show at Fairfield Hall. So we went to that, and without speaking bad of Max Crabtree and Down Martin, because that's what got me into it. Big Daddy was everything to me as a kid growing up. I also started seeing All-Star shows, and I went from seeing the Down Martin shows, which were fantastic, and all of a sudden this All-Star promotion show, which was something else. I mean, the shows are out of this world. I mean, obviously we know what's going on at the moment, so there's a lot of bills and posters getting shared around that like All-Star used to run, and looking at some of the bills they used to put on, I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, the lineups were just out of this world, and anyone who's got a bit of history or knowledge of wrestling, you'd look at those bills and think that's just fantastic. So, and I was lucky enough to go and watch some of them, and you know, how can you not be hooked up still to this day now and watching some of those shows?
Absolutely. And having recently visited Joel's new training school in Salisbury, I know he's got some old AllStar posters that was given to him by the legendary Brian Dixon. And of course, only a couple of weeks ago, we lost Brian Dixon, the legendary UK promoter, obviously the man behind AllStar Wrestling. There's yourself and Dino with Brian there. But I know you wrestled for Brian and AllStar Wrestling for many, many years, James. Knew the gent very, very well. Could consider him a very good friend. But what will the passing of Brian Dixon mean to you, my friend?
The end of the biggest part of my wrestling life, basically. I mean, I'm hoping I've still got a few more years left in wrestling. I really don't, but it's been 30 years now, and 25 of them was completely and utterly full-time for AllStar.
Wow. For
a 25-year period, I spent more time with Brian than my family. Wrestlers would come and go, but I stayed. I can't thank him enough for giving me the opportunities he did. I read some real nice comments last week online, and you know what? A lot of the comments were basically saying, and it really touched me, Brian Dixon allowed people to live out their dreams, basically. If that makes sense. My dream was to be a wrestler, and there was thousands of people who had a dream of being a wrestler, and you could wrestle for all different people. But when you wrestled for AllStar, for Brian Dixon, regardless of pay, regardless of how you travelled there, regardless of anything else, for that 10, 20 minutes in that ring, I was in the prestigious venues on with the absolute best opponents, and I was someone. Does that make sense? And he allowed me to live out my dream for 30 years, and I'm still living out my dream, and I owe everything to him. And there's some great memories, great times. I had things in my head I wanted to say, and then when it's coming to it, it's not as easy to say stuff. And we've got the funeral this week, which I'm really hoping and praying that it's a huge celebration of his life on Friday. Some great people are going. I've heard some of the names that are coming, and I think it's going to be an amazing turnout, and I want it to be an absolute celebration of his life.
Yeah, absolutely. But any fond memories or fun stories of being around Brian and the boys?
I mean,
anyone that stands out?
I mean, there's countless, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this. I just remember with Brian, you could be in his company, and he'd come up with an idea of a match or something, and it was ridiculous. Like, why on earth would you be thinking the biggest promoter that I've ever been around, the biggest company in Europe? So, and this is what he's coming up with, this idea of this match. You think, oh my God, this is never going to work. And then you'd sort of be saying, Brian, I'm going to do it, but I don't want to do this. I do not feel comfortable doing this. And then you do it, and it actually worked. And it was like, fair play, Brian. He had a bit of an eye for things. He would come up with some ideas. And I mean, it's not really a funny story, but I just remember, and the last time I actually saw him was in Telford, only a few months ago. A couple of months ago at the Open Days Fair. And he did exactly that. He put me, and I can't say the full match because it was, I might have been dressed up as somebody else, so I don't want to give out any rumours, but, and it was a match that this match should never have happened. Like, why would you put this match on paper? The bill was superb. The wrestlers there was out as well. And he put a tag on there. And I thought, this guy's got a sense of humour. I went and spoke to him, and he was having none of it. And he basically just said, go make the best of it. He always called me kid, even now I'm 43. He was always kid. Go just make it work. Go make the best of it. Go do it. And somehow we did, and the match was good. And I just went away driving on that night, sort of really entertained by. And obviously that was the last time I saw him, which is really sad. But I'm just glad I've got a memory like that where I went out there all guns blazing. Brian, I'm not doing this. This match is going to be awful. Why on earth are we doing this match? And it actually worked. And I wish I should have gone out late that night. I shook him in the hand and said, "Yeah, cheers, Brian. That was a good idea." So I mean, there's other guys could give you 1,000,001 funny stories.
I'm sure.
And again, it's not my thing really, but just some great times. And some times when he pulled some strokes, and I was like, wow, I can't believe he's doing this to me. But ultimately, for that amount of time, and I've always had a job. I've never had to get a real job. I say real job. Wrestling is a real job, obviously, but I've always been a wrestler. That's all I've ever done. I've never had to go and get another job. I've provided for my family. I'm living okay, and it's really been down to that, man. I mean, I've gone out and done other stuff on my own, but ultimately, that's always been my my bread and butter. So
absolutely fantastic, absolutely fantastic. He will be missed for sure. We got famed UK referee Steve Linsky watching at home. This won't come up with his name, but James, best in the UK. So thank you for watching, Steve. And Steve's a former guest on the show, but
Linsky's the top guy. He gets a bit of bad press, but I can't say a bad word about Linsky. I was only with him a couple of weeks ago, and he fell out the back of my van. He was helping me. He was helping put the ring up, and we just slipped out the back of the van. We heard a big scream. We all went running, and as soon as we realised he wasn't all right, he was hurt. I just couldn't stop laughing. I felt terrible. He's one of the funniest people I've met in this job. So, hey, Steve.
Yeah, I'm sure Steve's chuckling about that as we speak. But another person that you're very, very close to, and you actually put me in touch with him, Johnny Kidd. Now, I had him on one of my Legends Masterclass series and broke it down into 2 interviews, part 1 and part 2 from earlier on this year. A really, really top guy, one of the nicest guys in the business. And I think everybody I've spoken to about Johnny Kidd has said the same, that he's one of the nicest guys in the business and also one of the very best pros in the business as well. Widely regarded one of the best technical wrestlers that's ever lived, and still performing nowadays. But Johnny's been a long-term friend of yours pretty much from day one in your career, James. My question is kind of, tell us a bit about your friendship with Johnny and what he's meant to you all these years.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I was trying to work out the date earlier, and I couldn't because I thought this might come up. But it was 1993 for sure. And I was at school, and my dad come rushing to me school to say, "Oh, you had a call from Brian Dixon. You need to call Johnny Kidd. You need to meet him for a show tonight in Hastings." So I'm trying to ring around. There's no mobiles back then. I'm going out to the phone box trying to ring right away. So I met him to go to. I didn't meet him because we couldn't arrange a meet, but I got the train to Hastings, and I was on with him that night. And it was October, November '93 rings a bell, and I wrestled him. And I remember, like, when I first started, I was nervous about wrestling certain people, terrified, like just Sid Cooper, like Brian Maxey, Mel Sanders, all these people. I was just terrified of them because these were these large life characters. Well, John was a large life character. He was a huge superstar, but I just felt a second of meeting him and being in his company, I felt at ease. He had such a laid back, calm way, and he just opened himself to me, and he was just great from the first second I met him. I wrestled him that night. I don't know what happened. I just believe it might have been a good match. I remember Pat Roach was the main event that night. It was the first time I met Pat Roach as well. Pat Roach was a huge deal to me, a big, like, huge superstar to me. And he was there with a friend, and he sat and watched the match, and Johnny Kidd still talks about this day. And Pat Roach come and spoke to me in the end. He said, "How old are you and where are you from? What's your background?" And he asked me questions. I was just, my God, I'm sitting here, a 14-year-old kid talking to Pat Roach. It was, and he always just said how good that match was. And I just don't remember it because it was all Johnny Kidd. It was, just an amazing guy to wrestle. I probably wrestled him a couple of hundred times since. And we've tagged, we've travelled, we've spent a lot of time together. He's my son's godfather, which I'm really honoured that he is. And just a great guy. But I mean, going back to that first sort of 93 in the job, the likes of Johnny Kidd, Steve Gray, Mel Sanders, Sid Cooper, these guys were amazing to me, and they had no reason to be this good to me. They must have just seen me as a harmless young guy who was very polite, very nice. I've done a little bit of amateur, not a lot to justify myself that I was an amateur wrestler. I just had some sort of background, and these guys really took me under their wing for no other reason than they must have thought I was okay. And I still, unfortunately, Sid Cooper's not here now, but these guys were great to me. I mean, terrified when I met them, but then within minutes of meeting them, they were just a pleasure to be around, great to work, and just to learn to be a man, basically. I was travelling with these guys daily. I was with them constantly, so I was learning to wrestle. I was learning to be a grown-up. And so Mal and Steve, I still class them as very good friends to this day. I still keep in touch with them regular. And I just can't thank those sort of guys. Danny Collins, another one who was just out of this world, good to me when I started And then you move on to the likes of Robbie Brooks. So I'm like, these guys, these were these superstars from telly that just treated me like a family and helped me so much. And so, I mean, I just can't thank these guys enough. But I was just in awe of these guys at that age. To have those sort of people helping me was a huge, huge thing. And I can't thank them enough because they taught me to wrestle. There was no training schools back then. So these people taught me how to be a British wrestler, if that makes sense. And which was so much more than teaching me a wrestling move or teaching me a hold or teaching me a combination. It was about teaching me to be a wrestler and to work with an audience and to just compose yourself around others. I know some people always talk about like these people, the sports people, they turn up and there'd be someone, and they taught me how to be a sports person, basically how to be a wrestler. It's a great, it's a great experience.
Absolutely, and we're going to talk more about that. But Tom Scarborough is watching as well, former NXT UK referee, and I've seen Tom many times, mostly for Progress. But he's asked for your best Steve Linsky stories. I think the one of him falling out the back of the van is a pretty good story, to be honest with you. So
he had a heart attack at Butlins one time. There's another good story. I kept checking if he was all right, and he's having a heart attack. And I told him to go home. I said, "We'll cover for you," but he stayed, and he had a heart attack while the show was on, and still carried on. So that was another funny story.
What a trooper. And thank you, Tom, for watching. So I want to talk to you a bit about Doug Williams. We're going to go back and talk about Danny Boy Collins and everything. Now, in my research, James, now, yourself and Doug started in the business around the same time, I think 93 or thereabouts. But it wasn't until 2001 that the two of you had your first match together. So that's like 8 or 9 years later. Firstly, is that correct? Have I got my facts right? And why did it take the two of you so long to touch in a ring?
I mean, I don't know dates and figures, but I know Doug had been around the job for a while before we wrestled for sure. I think we'd met. I did a couple of shows for Tom Thumb. I didn't do much. So when I started, I was full time for Brian for about 3 years. Brian then had about a quiet year where he phased off a little bit. He was doing some other promoting stuff, and I went away and I spent a year, maybe 2 years, working for a guy called Tommy Stewart, Nigel Hammer, some of you might know. And I was doing holiday camps with him where we were doing the 15 plus shows a week on the holiday camp, all in the back of the van. I was having a great time. So I had a bit of time away then. Then Brian come back and he was busier than ever. So, and I feel it could have been around the 2000s, but Doug was always with Tom Thumb, really. He was doing some other camp shows. So we passed a couple of times actually wrestling each other. I would say, I could have been in a job nearly 10 years.
I think it was in Germany, 2001, I think, according to my research. But does that ring a bell?
Yeah, again, not really, but it could have been, if that makes sense. It certainly could have been. I was doing Germany stuff then. So, yeah, it could have well been that. Maybe the first time we worked. We certainly met each other. We certainly knew each other, but it wasn't until then, I'd say, when we first worked. And we haven't actually wrestled a lot over the years. And people think we have, and we might have done 20 matches, but we certainly haven't wrestled as much as what some people would imagine. Yeah. Not sure what the reason is. I love working Doug. Doug's great, and there's nothing bad to say about Doug at all. So, I'm not sure why we didn't spend more time together.
Yeah, obviously, just busy working for other promotions, different parts of the country. But I think yourself and Doug are widely considered to be the two main individuals that brought the traditional British style into the modern era. And kind of a lot of people have kind of learned the traditional British style and taken it as their own. And people from all over the world, Japan and Mexico and North America. I don't know whether you've ever discussed that with anybody else, but I think you and Doug are considered pioneers of the traditional British style and have taken it into more modern times.
Well, I'd certainly like to think so. I mean, you could probably put a few others on that list as well that we did it. But yeah, I would say me and Doug were the mainstay. And you think the test of time, we're still here from all those years ago. Certain people have come and gone. There was a time when a few lads were doing that stuff. A guy called Robbie Dynamite was doing it well. But yeah, some of these guys have come and they've gone, unfortunately. But for the guys that are still here, yeah, I'd say myself and Doug. And yeah, I mean, there was a lot of talk about certain wrestlers kept it going all through those years. But there was a lot of people still keeping wrestling going just when the internet first come along and when certain TV shows come around and FWA and things like that come around. Just because certain people wasn't involved in that, they were still very, very active and they were still keeping the British tradition alive. That's not a dig on what people have said, but there was a lot of talk about these were the guys who kept everything going. But why these things were coming around and this new revolution was coming in, there were certain guys that were still out 6-7 nights a week. I guess that's what the beauty was of working for Brian. There was a lot of other stuff going on. And as much as there was times I would have loved to have had my hand in on FWA, I would have loved to have been involved in certain organisations, sort of live TV, wrestling, all that stuff. But then you was out for Brian at least 6 nights a week, 2 shows on some days. You were just wrestling constantly, so you just didn't need to do anything else. But as much as people say there was lads that were keeping it alive, I think there was a lot of people keeping it alive at that time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to switch back to kind of your earlier days a little bit later on and Danny Boy Collins and Mel Sanders. But I want to talk a little bit about NXT and NXT UK in particular, because you were part of their coaching setup out of the Enfield Performance Centre, weren't you? And I think you said earlier that you've really only been involved in coaching for the last 4 or 5 years or so. But how and when did you first get the call to be part of NXT UK and to be under the WWE umbrella, that must have been a pretty mind-blowing experience for you. But how and when did you first get that call?
Yeah, well, I remember quite clearly. So we, when the guys used to come in, the W would come over to the O2 or Wembley, they'd do TV tapings, and they used to bring English guys in for extras, you probably heard. And so we were there as an extra, there was a load of us were there, and it was when they were signing all the NXT UK guys. There was all there doing a bit of a training session. Robbie Brookside was there, and I was doing a bit of a class, and we're just myself, Dean Allmark, Tony Spitfire, some others. We just sat at the back, and I was very envious that I wasn't involved in it. And I didn't quite know how this all come around, and I looked at some of the guys, and I thought, well, my wrestling isn't what they're looking for at the moment. I understand that, not knocking me, but it wasn't what they wanted. Looking at the guys, I didn't look like that, so I thought maybe there isn't really a place for me as a wrestler there, but I certainly wanted to be involved in it. I saw this organisation, I saw how big it was, I saw how big it was going to be. I wanted to be involved in this, and I just casually said to Rob Brookside, who I've gotten well with for years and years, and he's always said if he can help me and do anything for me, he would, and he'd come up trumps. I said, hey, Rob, anything for me here? Like I said, I don't know if he's been a wrestler, I don't know if he's coaching, I just don't know. I said, this looks fantastic, and I'd love to be a part of it. And he just said, brace yourself. He says, just bide your time, just who knows what's going to happen. He said, just leave it with us. And a few weeks later, I got a call off William Regals. So we were just saying, yeah, we're interested in you for a coach. Would you like to come in, and etc. I went in there with no coaching experience, and I'd even said to Steve Regal, I don't know about coach. I've never done it. And he said, just be you. He says, we know what you do. I'm well aware of your background, and I'll just be you. Just teach them what you know. And if it's good, then it's going to work. If it's not good, then obviously we'll look elsewhere, sort of thing. And I'd like to think it went all right. And I did a couple of guest coaches there. And then a while later, I got a contract, and then I got re-signed. And it was just, it changed my life. And I've had an amazing time. And just seeing how like the environment was and seeing how different wrestlers. I'd never really seen wrestling as a business at that level, if that makes sense. I'd seen wrestling, I'd seen great wrestlers, I'd seen fantastic wrestlers, I'd seen wrestlers all over the world that were fantastic. I'd seen shows that were fantastic, but I'd only really seen live wrestling. And all of a sudden now I'm involved in a huge TV organisation, which is the biggest wrestling business out. I mean, it's huge. I mean, we know what it is. And just seeing how big and what goes into it and all these little intricate details, it just blew my mind. And so to be around that for the time I was, and to be involved in the training, then going on to producing, it was huge, and I just embraced every day of it. There was times when my head was about to explode, because I turn up to a wrestling show, and if anyone would tell you, I feel like I'm the most relaxed man at any show at any time. Turn up, I know what I'm doing. Even if I don't, I'm relaxed until that bell goes, and then it's business mode. But when I went to WE, I'd be there on the TV days, and my head would be all over the place, and they're just trying to take everything in. And all of a sudden, you've done it, you go back and think, wow, that was just out of this world. And I've gone back and watched the product, and I've watched things, I've heard guys knock it and say this and that. Well, I'm not knocking any of that. To me, it was fantastic as a product, as a wrestling ability, as the setup, and everything about it to me was out of this world. And it had some amazing wrestling minds working for it. And so just completely honoured to be involved in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I echo all of your words there. And as far as I was concerned, especially when NXT UK was really getting going, and you had them awesome takeover shows as well, it was the best weekly hour of wrestling entertainment on the TV anywhere. And some of the takeovers, I was lucky enough to be at Takeover Cardiff, Takeover Blackpool 2, and various others. And just some of the most amazing wrestling action. You almost couldn't associate it as a WWE product. But tell us about your average day within NXT UK, both as a coach and as a producer. What would your day consist of?
Well, it changed a bit so at first I was there. It was non-COVID time. So when it was non-COVID, you could basically get into the performance centre in Enfield around about 10, for example, and you'd be taking a class. You could have a class of 10 to 12 people. You could have a 2-hour class, and then you may go to another class, shadow that, and then you could end up doing some sort of match studies where you'd be watching matches there. There'd be 3-4 rings going at the time. So there'd be other training sessions going. You'd be looking in and just helping out. You're basically there all day just trying to help as much as you can. If you see anything, you're helping. You're in the ring, you're observing, you're watching stuff. You're just constantly trying to help guys, basically. But what my biggest take was that you're helping guys that are actually very good. Helping good guys get better is brilliant, if that makes sense. You know, it's great if you've got new guys, because then you've got a specific class, then you can teach them. But I found some of the class there, you had some excellent people there, some really good wrestlers there, and you're just helping them to get better, basically. And you're trying to teach them to get better for a specific role for a TV show, basically. So it was really rewarding. And then when you could see things that you'd trained and tried to do that week, and then you'd see it sort of put into practice at the TV events at the following week, that was really great to see. And certain people you'd really spend time with. Some people were not getting certain things, but you could spend extra time with them. We'd have an open ring time where guys would just be in there, and then you could just help out with those little bits. That was very rewarding at times. And then when it came to the TV days, that's when it was, to me, it was very full on. When it got to COVID time, there was a lot less staff. So basically, coach-wise, was just myself and Johnny Moss. And I mean, in my opinion, Johnny Moss won that thing. He was the backbone of that NXT UK. He was superb what he did, and I was in awe watching John, because I thought I was okay at this, and I'd watched what he was doing, and it made me realise that I'm nowhere near there. There's a lot to go. You know, at first we had Rob there, we'd have Johnny Saint there, we'd have all sorts of people there. Then all of a sudden, COVID went, and then it was just myself and John, and then watching John take control of everything, scheduling everything, and being hands-on with everything was absolutely great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have any personal highlights or favourite memories of the NXT UK days and your involvement in particular?
So there was, there's certain matches. You see, when I first got to producing, I wasn't aware that was even part of my job. I thought I was there as a coach. I never realised that was going to be something. And then we went to one of the live events. The first one I did was Coventry. It was at the Coventry Sky Dome. It was huge. It was a lot of people there. It was a big event, and I'd never seen one of their live events. And all of a sudden, I'm producing a match. So that was really overwhelming to me. And that was a massive thing that I wasn't expecting to do. And then not long after that, we went to the Download Festival, and I was producing a lot of matches there, which was it was in a different environment. That was really daunting to me. But I felt I kept getting thrown in at the deep end on stuff I wasn't really sure of. And I find for me, if you throw me into something in wrestling, that's when I'm at my best, really. If you just say, right, go in, this is what you got to do. You got to make things work. I've heard that sound a lot lately. Just make it work. If you get given something in wrestling, make it work. A lot of people complain about stuff. A lot of people don't want to do something. If that's what the orders are, that's what you're being asked to do. Make it work. And I felt with that, there was a lot of times I was very uneasy, but just made it work. There was a Pacific match. I always remember it was one of my favourite matches to produce. Was a guy called Kenny Williams and Noam Dar. And I was thrown in the deep end. It was quite a big match they were doing it. They'd had a bit of a build up to the match, and I felt so out of my depth. And Noam was great. He helped me, and I helped them. We all helped each other, and somehow this match came together. And I watch it back sort of quite often. And to me, it was brilliant. It's an absolute fantastic match. There was a bit of skullduggery at the end, as I said. There was stuff going on at the end, and and I think between us all, and with the writers, it was all put together, and it's a real match that I'm very, very proud of. There's a lot of matches I'm proud of. A lot of matches while I was doing NXT, but I always remember that one. That was one where my head was the complete mind mess, and it comes together. I was really pleased on it. That's quite a memorable one for me.
And being a coach and a producer at, like I say, a juggernaut, a machine like WWE, has it helped you as a talent, as a performer, when piecing your matches together before you go through the curtain?
Yes and no. Unfortunately, I'm still seeing myself when I work on a show. I'm a live wrestler. I don't really do TV shows. There might be an event where I'm at where there's a hard camera there. There might be a roaming camera, but I'm still a live wrestler. So I feel like I should be using it more by advantage, because that's what I'm actually ultimately trying to do. I want to be back in that job. I want to do that. I want my future to be producing and coaching. So I feel like I should be, but I'm still stuck in the mindset when I'm at a show, a live event. It's about those people. There might be 100, there might be 2, there might be 500 people. They need to be entertained. So as much as I feel right, I'm going to try and structure a match, or something, but I'm going to try and arrange stuff that is for that camera. I'm going to try and get these moments. I'm going to try and tell this story, this and that. Ultimately, I need that crowd to be involved. And when I'm on 4th or 5th on a show, I was on a show the other day, Black Country Wrestling. The ability of the wrestlers was out of this world. I just can't fault some of the wrestlers on it were great, but I couldn't help watch the show and think, well, these guys are arranging things, and they're doing it no matter what, and these crowds just weren't buying it. And my job that day with the other guys I was in with was to go out there and entertain those people. If we went off course, if we went here, we went there. That's what I can do, and I feel like is a very rewarding thing. If you can do that on a show, it keeps you current on a show. But so as much as I should be using it to my advantage, I don't think I am enough. I'm still just working daily for those shows and thinking these people need to be entertained, and this is what I'm going to do.
Totally get you. Totally get you. Now, I know we had a little bit of a chat before we went live, James, and you spotted that little promo video I put out this evening to promote this. And I said I'm going to maybe get a cheeky bit of inside info into NXT Europe. So James, what can you tell us about NXT Europe and your involvement?
Are you ready?
Go on.
I wish I had taken it to you. I'm so sorry.
Oh, so close.
I want to tell you something because I want to know myself. I'm hoping, I'm praying it comes off. I want to be involved. I'm doing everything I can. We're doing some guest coaching over in Orlando at the moment, which has been great. We've just done 2 separate stints. Hopefully we've got another one coming soon. And I feel like that's in preparation for it. But no, there's no dates, no official, nothing has been said at all. I wish there was. But when it happens, I really want to be involved in it. Let me tell you, I would be honoured and I want that job because it's where I see my future. And it might not happen, but it's where I see my future. But in the meantime, I'm just going to keep doing this and gaining as much more experience as I can.
Absolutely. And I'm going to jump to another question that came through before we went live. Now, this is kind of going back a little bit to your wrestling fandom from friend of the show, Richie. Who were some of your heroes in wrestling as a fan and growing up in the business? So, I mean, you might have a couple of different answers there, but do you have any idols or any heroes that you really, really look up to? And some we've probably already spoken about or might do soon, but heroes or idols in the business?
Well, I mean, growing up in a job, I was so I think so Roller Rocco was fantastic. So I remember like really being excited watching Roller Rocco from an age of sort of 8 or 9, going to the venues. So let's say it was all Big Daddy at first, and then you change it because you realise you're getting a bit older. You sort of see through a little bit. So now all of a sudden it's Rocco. Rocco was everything. The most exciting wrestler I'd ever seen. Finlay was good, but Rocco was the one. Now all of a sudden you get to 11, 12. Now you're looking at it through a different set of eyes. Finlay was the guy. Do you know what I mean? Finlay was the absolute master. And then you're watching matches that you never really saw much in. The very first show I ever saw, the second match was Kazuo Martin against Ray Steele. Now that was put on purely to really quiet the crowd down for when Big Daddy come on in the main event. And it did exactly that on the tin. But then I get to 12, 13 years of age and I'm watching shows and I'm watching these guys and I'm just in awe watching these sort of guys wrestle. Tony Sinclair was another one, an absolute hero of mine as a fan growing up because he would involve you so much in when you're watching these sort of people as a live wrestler. So it changed a lot over the years, and then I was very lucky. They say like you shouldn't meet your heroes. There's a few of them I could tell you that I met, and I was very, very honoured. I met just about Finlay, fantastic and great, fantastic. Steve Gray, he was probably growing up my favourite wrestler, the best wrestler I ever watched, best wrestler I ever wrestled, and all the way through to when he retired, he still to me was the ultimate. And I think it was because he was that good. He was everything the technical wrestler people said he was, but he had a snarl about him. He looked like he might just bite your ear off if you pissed him off or something. Sorry, he just had that niggle about him. So that's as far as I want to go. He just used to have a bit of a niggle about it. He was so good, so good. And any time I wrestled him as a kid, as growing up into my 20s, there was just something intense about those matches. They were just something special about it. And yeah, so he when people say who was the ultimate, who was the best, in my opinion, it was him. I could say list people like Danny Collins, Richie Brooks, Rob Brooks, I could list 1,000 people that was up there as the masters. Mel Sanders, another one. I could just go on and on. But the ones that really, Steve Gray would have been the ultimate all the way through. As I got to wrestle a lot, unfortunately, I never wrestled Rocco. I wish I could have done. Wrestled Nagasaki a lot, which I was in awe of it, but they weren't the best matches I've had. But it was just what a thing to say I wrestled Ken Nagasaki.
Oh yeah.
I wrestled John Haystacks, which was just like, oh my God, I'm actually wrestling this huge, larger than life character.
He's a behemoth. Huge.
Yeah, so to say you work with these people is huge. It's just massive. And these were my heroes. And I got to meet them, and most of them were fantastic. There's not many I could give you bad stories about some of the heroes I met. I'm real honoured. They say don't meet heroes, but I was lucky that when a lot of people now have heroes in wrestling, they might never meet them. They might never get to be around them. They're so sort of far away. My heroes were guys that in a couple of years' time I was travelling with, I was spending time with, I was really spending like good time with them. Now some of my class's friends, and so I was very lucky that they're my heroes. And my absolute hero would have been Max Bygraves down away from wrestling. Max Bygraves was the ultimate, and I actually got to meet Max Bygraves. So that was someone out of wrestling that they say don't meet heroes. Well, he was another one. I met Max Bygraves once, got a nice picture with him, and that's he's the big celebrity that I met. That's my claim to fame.
Absolutely. Let me bring up this picture because I think a few people that you've already mentioned during these. You got Danny Boy Collins, Rollerball Rocco. You got Robbie Brookside at the front there. I think Terry Funk. I can see Tony St. Clair, yourself. I think that's Canyon at the back as well. But tell us a bit about this picture. When did this happen?
Yeah, so this was Tony St. Clair's retirement show. This was,
Wow.
can't think of what year it was, but yeah, Tony St. Clair had his retirement match with Finlay. It was fantastic.
Yeah,
Terry
Finlay.
Funk was there. I think Tony spent a lot of time with Terry over the years in Japan. We've got Dave Morgan, who was a huge star back in Germany in the day. Obviously, Rollerball Rocco's there as well. I mean, Drew McDonald's there, Big Tiger Steele's there. Yeah, it's a great Rob's on the floors out there. It was a fantastic weekend to be there. I remember it so clearly. We had to rush. I had to get changed in the car that day. We was in such a rush. Flights were delayed, and I remember me and Danny Collins were getting changed in the back of the car. We went on first on the first day, and then we relaxed. And the second day, yeah, it was, and it's all on YouTube. The whole show. If anyone wants to watch it, there's both my matches on there. There's a tag with Canyon and Drew McDonald, and I think the matches with Sinclair and Finlay all on there. It's, so yeah, that whole show is there, and it's a fantastic show to be involved in, to be around those sort of people, and to socialise with them as well. It was a big weekend. That was a great time.
Oh, absolutely. And we've briefly mentioned Danny Boy Collins, and let's say an extraordinary, let's say another legend of the UK scene, another wrestler that started very young, very similar to yourself, and he took you under his wing when you first broke in, I understand. Now, I'm guessing that because he started in the business very young, he obviously saw something in you that reminded him of himself. But tell us a bit about Danny Boy Collins and how important he was to your career, especially in the early days.
Well, he was, as a fan, he was huge, because like the matches he had with Rocco and Finlay, in my opinion, like, nobody really touched them. St. Clair's were great. They were all good, but there was something as a youngster, as a 12-year-old kid, you could watch those matches and really get behind him. He was the ultimate bluer. He was just such a big deal. And then there's me, 14-year-old kid, and he's on all the shows with me. And I had a couple of matches with him really early on, and he really sort of took me aside and showed me things and just helped me. I was sort of self-taught. I did amateur for a bit. I'd get in the ring when I'd put the rings up. I was putting the rings up when I started. So I'd just get in and just wrestle a little bit with another guy who did amateur. We didn't really know what we were doing. And certain guys would just say, who's showing you that? Well, no one else would do it this way. And they just show you little things. And Danny just kept pulling me aside and doing things with me. But I wrestled Danny, and he had a way of doing things in the matches where he just taught you. He was like, every match with him was an education. And he would do things, and before you know it, you've had this amazing match, not really knowing what you've done, but you've gone away with this book of knowledge because this guy's done it all for you. I might be giving too much away, and I shouldn't be, but he helped me so much without probably, I don't think he realised until maybe 10 years later when we sort of spoke more and I really got to know him. Because you've got to remember as well, I was in all these people. There's certain people now, Marty Jones is another one. I see Marty around and I'm still a bit like, Marty was a big deal to me. So I see him and I'm not totally relaxed around him. I should treat him as my friend. I've known him for 30 years now. I should be able to be relaxed. But it took me 10 years to sort of be Danny Collins' friend because I just saw him as this superstar. So all the time he's teaching me, all the time he's giving me all this knowledge, I didn't spend the days and months travelling with him like I did with Steve Graham, Mel Sanders. So I got friendly with them a lot quicker. Danny Collins was always this superstar that I was in awe of. And 10 years later, we sort of, I'd say, got friends, and I think we are friends to this day. And then I think he finally realised how much he actually did for me. But he just naturally wanted to help me. And I've seen him around other people. Certain people naturally want to help people. Well, Brookside's another one. They want to help people. They're not. They obviously they love the glory. They love things for themselves. But ultimately, if they can help someone, it's a huge achievement to them. And I guess when you get to a certain stage in your career, which I feel I'm getting to now, there is no better feeling than helping people that generally want to be helped. And I really wanted to be helped. So it was genuine every time they helped me.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up a couple of pictures here, and I don't mean to embarrass my guest, but that's a pretty handsome fella there, I've got to say.
Page there, I'd say. Look at the mullet.
What era, what year was that? Do you remember?
94, I'd say. Yeah, 94.
So you'd have been a year or two in already.
Wearing wrist tape. I thought wrist tape was when you did the wrist, so I'm not sure that is right. But yeah, that was, I'd say about, 94, that would have been.
Yeah, and one more picture, and I showed you this earlier. There's a couple of pictures, but you've mentioned Danny Boy Collins. There he is on the right, and yourself on the left. And I think that's Mel Sanders without the shirt on there. I'm not too familiar with the guy in the middle, but tell us about that picture, and maybe even this one here, because you guys look like you're having the time of your life.
Yeah, I remember that particular picture. That was just summed up that day. So basically, that was for Mike Quackenbush contacted me and said we're doing the King of Trios tournament. I didn't really understand what that was, and he said I'd like you to get a team together. You got any ideas? And I mentioned a couple of names, and he said, well, yeah, they're okay, but he says I think that's like the boxer. But who would you really want? And I said, well, Mal and Danny Collins. He said, get it, do it. I said, well, I don't know if I can. He said, well, just try. So give them a call, see what they say. And I called them and they did it, and it was just, and that's the other guy in that first pitch was Steve Gray, so he come along just to come along to spend the day with Mal, and I think to me, I mean, there's a brilliant YouTube clip on it where if we finish the match, we lose, but and at the end of the match, the crowd they say, right, there's a big cheer for James Mason. I get a bit of a cheer. Can we have a bit of a cheer for Danny Collins? A huge cheer. Then you get a cheer for Mel Sanders, and the place erupted and there was a real sense of appreciation. And Mal and Danny had never done these sort of, when I say indie shows, they're not. It was just a different type of audience show. Yeah. It was a good audience there, but they wasn't the average audience that want to see wrist locks and headlocks, but they wanted to see things done right. And I watched the match back, and it's a credit. It's a really good match, and the reaction they got when they walked out, it really meant something. And like, I don't know if Mal would ever admit it, and I think Danny might, but I think it meant something to them. They drove away from that show with a whole new image of what like new age wrestling is and things like that. They knew they would come to the end. They knew that was, I think Mal might have had a few more matches after that, but I think they left that day with a real sort of, they had a moment there. And the changing room, the locker room, the guys was all over them. It was an absolutely fantastic day. I'd just done a full run on the camps, doing 10 plus shows a week, putting the ring up, taking down, and I was exhausted. And I got to that day, and it was an absolutely fantastic day. But that one picture where we're all laughing pretty much summed up that day. It was a huge honour that they did it, and I really thank Quackenbush for that, Mike, because again, I know there's bad things people say about him, but I've got to take as I find with Mike. He was very good to me, and he allowed me to do things like that. He took me over to Philadelphia one time for a Johnny Kidd Memorial Cup thing, and he gave me a couple of experiences that I was very pleased I got to do. So, and that was definitely one of them, like really up there in a high point in my career.
Yeah, and similar to Danny Boy Collins, Mel Sanders, he was in the previous picture, but this one here, it's obviously a match graphic between the two of you. But Mel Sanders was another one that took you under his wing, had dozens of matches with Mel as well between the two of you. Yeah. And he was a bit of a mentor of yours, wasn't he?
Yeah, hugely. I mean, completely took me under the wing from day one. And the only reason that was, I think all these guys, if you was okay to them, they was good to you. And I've heard people say, oh, he was a bully, he did this, he said that. Well, if you was an arsehole, they didn't give you the time of day. It was as simple as that. So anyone who's got any stories about, oh, well, these people bullied me or these did that. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I can certainly speak for me. If you was good to these people, you got a lot back, if that makes sense. You know, and he was a prime example of that. And so the first ever show I did, there was a guy called Lee Bonson was wrestling, Howard. And I knew him from the amateur gyms. And so I'm there on the very first show I'm doing. I'm just finished putting the ring up. Lee Bonson comes in with Mel Sanders, and Lee Bonson come and said hello, and he knew me, and Mal sort of straight away took to me because he believed I'd done a bit of a background. I'd done some amateur, and he knew some people I'd met in the amateur ranks, and so we had a great bond from day one, and even to this day I still keep in touch with Mal, and just some real good times with Mal, travelling, spending time with him, had some really good social sides. Like we still meet up a couple of times a year for Mal arranges a big dinner in London for a lot of the older wrestlers go there. Recently did one with Bobby Barnes, and I managed to sit with like Bobby Barnes for 2 hours eating dinner with him and getting to know him. And it was just an amazing thing. And I'm just so honoured that Johnny Kidd, Steve Gray, they invite me to those sort of occasions. It's really nice to do.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about Japan, because I think you've spent a bit of time over in Japan. Certainly the early 2000s. You may have been over a few times since, but Michinoku Pro rings a bell. And like I say, being a traditional British style wrestler, going over to the Orient and experiencing that different style, that different culture, that must have been a bit of an experience for you as well.
Yeah, it was massive. So the first time I went, it was with me and Robbie Brookside went. And there was a few sort of stories about guys going before me and not doing too well. There's a couple of guys got injured. I'm not going to say names, but they went there and then they were back a day or so later. Now all of a sudden, me and Robbie Brookside are going, and I was very nervous. The first day I wrestled with Robbie Brookside, and I think it was good because me and Rob had wrestled so many times. It was me and Rob we were talking earlier about certain people having good chemistry. Rob was amazing chemistry for me to wrestle with. If I needed to do matches and put a bit of time in and to really get people behind us and really get them invested in that sort of match, Rob was the guy. And if we did it again today, it would still be the guy. So we did the first day in Japan. It was great. The next day I'm on with this guy that I didn't really know his background. I just saw this guy, and he looked a freak. He was huge. He looked huge. He was an impressive looking guy. He was a guy called Jinsei. Yeah, and he had another name in WE. He just looked this big, impressive guy, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to come unstuck here. I was very nervous. I thought something's happened because I'd heard stories about it, and I was only young. I think I was still in my teens, and I went on with Jinsei, and I think the match was superb. I wish there was footage of it.
Hakushi, I think he was known by. Hakushi,
right,
yeah.
Terrified, just thinking, I shouldn't be here. I'm not ready to be in Japan. So there's a setup. Brian Dixon set me up here because he was like an agent for it. Someone set me up here. Rob was there, and Rob was as relaxed as anyone. Rob had been before, no problem. But I thought there's something not right here. It just didn't feel right. I'm travelling around in a coach. I got my own hotel room for the night. I'd always have to share 5 people in the room before that. So I was being treated really well. And I thought there's something that's going to come unstuck here. And I wrestled Jinsei, and I think it was good. I'm very pleased with it. And yeah, we had a 3-week tour there, and it just got better and better. I remember one of the nights I was doing stuff. I was trying to fly around, doing a bit more energetic stuff because I could still move a little bit in a day. And they basically said, we don't need you to be that style of wrestler. We want you to be James Mason. We want you to wrestle. And as soon as they said that, it was like music to my ears. That was perfect. And the guys out there, everyone I wrestled was great. We were getting to a stage in this country where the shows were still good in England, but you'd get some wrestlers who wasn't quite as good as the wrestlers were in that first few years when I started. When I first started, everyone was good. So then all of a sudden I went to another country, and everyone I wrestled in Japan was great. Yeah. I think it's always been 7 times I've been. So I've had some good stuff, and I've been gone more recently before COVID for Jimmy Suzuki was doing some stuff over there. So I was lucky to go for him a few times. And yeah, I've had some great experience in Japan. Wrestling-wise, to me, is a fantastic place to wrestle. A bit lonely back in the day. I was a bit younger as I grew up. I could venture out and sort of do a bit of sightseeing, so it was a better place to be. But the wrestling itself was superb.
Yeah, I'm going to throw out some names to you now, and certainly in the early 2000s, I think I read somewhere that you worked Jake Roberts once upon a time, and you've also worked probably maybe after that Gangrel quite a few times and become good friends with him, and Bryan Danielson as well. What are your memories of being in the ring with those three? And I think Gangrel you had a whole ton of matches with, and Danielson also.
But yeah, I mean, Gangrel, he was there was a time when I loved wrestling certain people. There was a time when we'd be wrestling every night of the week, and you get to a venue and you'd be tired. You think, I know I've got wrestle time, but I'm tired. I don't feel this. I'm not. And then all of a sudden you see one with Gangrel. Well, Gangrel's a different breed. He can go. Even as he's getting older, he's still an absolute machine. There's nothing I could ever do to hurt him. There's nothing I could do to make him tired. He's an absolute machine. So you get to sort of 8 o'clock, and I think, well, I'm on with Gangrel in a minute, and I'm absolutely exhausted. I've got nothing left. I've been travelling all day. I've built a ring. And then the bell would go, and these fireworks would appear, and he was really good at getting the best out of me. I really enjoyed wrestling him in a way that you'd come out of that match and you'd been in a match, you'd been in a fight, and it was intense. Reaction was good. It was great. And I think for the type of shows that Brian was running, that's what they wanted to see him doing well. A lot of guys would come over from another country and they would have star. They didn't really need to put a shift in like they was expected to. And I'm not taking anything away from them. Some of these guys are a bit older, and they weren't expected to, but Gangrel, he wrestled in front of 10 people, 10,000 people the same every night. He was an absolute machine. Bryan Danielson, he said, is another one. Fantastic to wrestle. Just certain people you just naturally gel with. You could have 2 matches. By the 3rd match, you've got this match down, and it's Bryan Danielson. He understood British wrestling. He understood what he needed to do at these shows, if that makes sense. Certain wrestlers come over here and they just get TJ Wilson with another one. They just got the British wrestling scene, and they just loved it. And if you can come to this country and understand how to work it, I don't know if there's a better place in the world to wrestle. It's just when some people come here and they don't quite understand it, they don't read the audience right, it can be quite hard. But some of those names you just said, Marty Jannetty was another good one. I was on with him a lot when he was here. Really pleased I got to know him a bit, and I think it was at a later stage in his career, but he was very good. Honky Tonk was another good one. There was a time when these WE guys or WF guys at the time were coming over, and Earthquake was another one, and we had some great matches. Both the Bushwhackers was here for a lot. So I feel like I'm name dropping. I do apologise, but these
you carry on.
These were all the guys that they wanted to wrestle for Brian Dixon. They wanted to wrestle for Scott Conway, and I was lucky to go on with these people like most nights. I think they obviously realised I was good for them. I was nice and safe, and it was good to work with them. And but yeah, I was really honoured that I got to go. And so Yokozuna was another one I got to wrestle a lot. And yeah, these guys, it was an honour that they wanted to come over and they wanted to. And I feel like they were picking some of their opponents at times. They would say, "I want to wrestle this guy," and So I was always honoured when I know people have asked to wrestle me over the years, and that's a huge honour to know that people want to wrestle me.
Yeah. Now, as we start to wind down this fantastic episode of Wrestling with Johners with UK legend James Mason, a fun question from me then, James. Now, going through my research, and I don't know if this has ever struck a chord with yourself, but you seem to be the master of the battle royals and the Rumble style matches. And I think I counted up 30 plus victories on battle royals and Rumble style matches. Is that got to be one of your favourite style or one of your favourite gimmick matches? You always seem very successful in them.
No, not in the slightest. God, that was a weird question, John. I wasn't expecting that. No, that's just so when people say how many matches I've done, I couldn't put a number on how many I've done, but nearly every show I do, you do 2 single matches and a tag. There's wrestling for Brian. Brian was the king of the tag captains. It would always be a tag captains for Brian, or you do a singles match and then go into a rumble. It was from about the 2000s. You just accepted that every show you'd be in a battle royal, a rumble, an 8-man tag. The Butlin shows, any camps would always be a singles, then go into some sort of rumble. And yeah, I guess Brian just thought a bit of me, and he'd always, I suppose I was a safe bet. I think that the thing with Brian shows, you had to send them home happy, you had to send them home, and and it was just an easy option. I think Dean Allmark took a few wins off me. I didn't like it when he came in. He managed to get a few sneaky wins from me, but yeah, no, it wasn't something I wanted to do. It just happened to be you turn up to a show and you accept there's going to be a rumble, and I did have a bit of a winning streak, but it's not something I brag about. Let me tell you.
That could be your new moniker, your new nickname, the king of the rumbles or the king of the battle royals.
I'll keep that quiet, John, if you don't mind.
No problem. And another question that came in before the show, from friend of the show, Richie. What's been some of your best matches or favourite opponents from your career so far? So I'm sure you've got a list as long as your arm, and you've probably mentioned a few already. But any particular matches or opponents that really stand out, that will live with you forever?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a few now. I might bore you now. So I was 15 years of age. I remember this one really well. And now my dad, he doesn't remember this now, but at the time, this was a huge thing. It was at Hastings Whitewell Theatre. My dad used to come down and watch me at loads of shows. I was already on the road, so he'd drive down and just watch me at a show. And he was always really proud of watching the matches. And so anyway, on this particular day, he asked where I'm wrestling. And I didn't tell him. I just said, no, I'm not sure I'm on with. Anyway, me and Rob Brookside walk out to do a tag match. Not unusual there. He'd seen me and Rob in there again. The next wrestler comes out. The first opponent is a guy called Cole Kramer. I don't want to talk too much of him, but and then all of a sudden his tag partner came out was Giant Haystacks, and my dad's sitting there, his jaw dropped, and he could not believe that his little 15-year-old son was wrestling Giant Haystacks, and it was just a huge match at Hastings, which is a venue where we used to go to constantly. So there's that one. I had another one at Western Supermare against Fit Finlay, getting involved with Rob. Rob had just injured himself, so he couldn't do this match, and had to go do like a hardcore match with Fit Finlay, and that was, I remember that was a tough one, but it was equally like such an achievement to have done that. There's another one. This is an unusual one, so you wish you're not asked now. And I've actually got this on DVD. And it's not as good as I remember. On a day, I thought this match was amazing. I've watched it back, and I'm not going to watch it again. But it was me and Tony Sinclair against Ken Nagasaki and Steve Gray. I mean, what an unusual match to be in. It was one of these ones where me and Tony come out, Nagasaki come out, and he said, "No, I need a partner. I'm not doing this on my own. Send anyone out." Steve Gray come running out. And I don't think Steve wanted to do it, but he ended up doing a tag with us. And so that was massive to say he was in with those sort of people. So there's been a few good. I've had some amazing ones with Mel Sanders. One particular one at Portsmouth Guildhall rings a bell. Don't know why it was so significant, but that was a good one. And like now, so when I don't wrestle Dean Allmark as much as I'd like to, but I still feel the same very special about when I wrestle Dean Allmark, and I would love to have a circuit go round and have one last run with Dean, because who knows what's happening in the future.
That's a match I'd love to see. That's a match I'd love to see for sure. That's a match I'd love to see. But before we say goodbye to you, just a quick reminder to my viewers and listeners at home on my next few guests. And I mentioned her earlier, but next week, Wednesday the 21st, Rain Leverkusen, one of the top up-and-coming talents on the UK scene, just recently returned from a tour of Japan, doing some wonderful things. But Rain Leverkusen will be my guest next week, next Wednesday. And then we did mention this gentleman earlier on, but I do have Mike Quackenbush coming onto the show, and just bringing up the date here. Mike Quackenbush will be coming onto the show Monday the 26th so the following week. And looks like quite a highly regarded promoter from over in the States, Shikara, and also a highly regarded technical wrestler. And looks like has a long history in the business. Be interesting to see what Mike says on Monday the 26th. And my final guest will be this guy here, Vusic, who's doing some wonderful things in the north of the country. Let's say appearing for various promotions, North in particular, 1PW, and various others, Tidal Championship Wrestling also. But Vusic, a young, exciting, up-and-coming individual. Can't wait to speak to him on Thursday the 29th. So check out all of those. Make sure you tuned in live and make sure that you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of those. But James, I know we had a brief chat before we went live, and I know you kind of don't do a lot of social media, but you did say that you do have one or two that you are keen to update a bit more frequently, or one or two that you do use. But if we wanted to reach out and say hi, or maybe see some pictures or some footage of yours, where can we do so, my friend?
Yeah, no, I really need to up my game on this sort of side of things. I mean, I've got a Twitter page. I think that's a UK James Mason.
Right.
I would say that's what it is. So, I mean, I don't put much on, but if I had a few more followers, I might start. I think, yeah, if I want to get a few more followers, I need to start putting stuff on. So I do use Twitter a little bit. I mean, I'm always looking on Facebook. I do like looking at stuff. I love seeing what's going on, but there is a Facebook page that someone else sort of runs for me that I have very little to do with. But I guess the more it's used, the more I would get involved in it. But yeah, I'm my own worst enemy really with stuff like that. I should be pushing this sort of stuff and trying to get at it. But touch wood, I'm still sort of doing okay. And I guess just anyone can contact me at any time. I'm on any of the social media. You can find me on there if you want to hire a ring, or you're looking for a wrestler who doesn't do as much as someone else but still adds a lot to the show. Then I think I'm your guy. So yeah, I'm still very active and still very busy. And
for seminars as well, James. Don't forget, you're a busy guy with seminars.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, basically, I don't want to stop doing this job. I'm not ready to stop. I don't know what's happening in the future, but until something else happens, I just want to keep doing this. And I'm loving life at the moment. I'm quite busy. We're just going into a real busy summer season, which is going to be one of the busiest I've had in a long time, which is great. So just because I'm not sort of out there putting stuff on every day and telling the world I'm still very busy, but would always like to be busier, if that makes sense.
But James Mason, this interview's been a long time in coming, but I'm glad that it's finally happened. One of my favourite guests in a long, long time. But if you've got a parting message, a final message from James Mason to my viewers at home, or any of your followers, people that have supported you over the years, what would your final message be?
Enjoy yourself. I don't know. Just
That's good enough.
Have fun. Just enjoy the job. This job is an amazing thing. I'm so blessed that I'm still in this job, and I've had an amazing life, and I want to keep having an amazing life. And if you do this job right and treat it right, I think it can be amazing.
There we go.
Part and thought.
There we go. James Mason, you've been a wonderful guest, and I'll see you at the shows, no doubt. But thank you very much, my friend, and thanks for everybody for watching as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.